United States President Donald Trump struck a blow to dictator Putin where no one expected it. Moreover, this blow hit not only Russia but also Iran. As early as tomorrow, August 8, the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan will unexpectedly arrive at the White House to meet with Trump. It is expected that with Donald Trump mediating, the parties will sign a peace agreement that grants the United States exclusive rights to create and manage a strategic transit corridor through the South Caucasus, known as the Zangezur corridor. And this will be a real blow to Russia's influence in the region and will strengthen the influence of the United States and Turkey. But at the same time, this corridor under United States control puts an end to Iran's influence in the region and also cuts Iran off from Russia and the entire South Caucasus. Let me remind you that earlier Iran even threatened Azerbaijan with war if the Zangezur corridor was created, especially if it was handed over to the control of the United States of America. But unexpectedly, Armenia agreed to such a step and this corridor will become a reality. Moreover, there are a lot of interesting details there, which we will discuss with you in this episode. My name is Alexei Peci. We'll get to everything step by step, but before we start, subscribe to this channel, give it a like, leave any comment you want, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peci News. The link is in the video description. Let's continue. So, already on Friday, August 8th, a historic event will take place in the South Caucasus. Let me start from a bit further back. Armenia and Azerbaijan have been in a state of conflict since the late 1980s when Nagorno-Karabakh, an Azerbaijani region with a predominantly Armenian population, separated from Azerbaijan with the support of Armenia. I'm choosing rather diplomatic ways of expressing things here. Both Armenia and Azerbaijan gained independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. And now the peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which the leaders of the two countries, Nikol Pashinyan and Ilham Aliyev, are set to sign on August 8 at the White House, will grant the United States exclusive rights to develop a strategic transit corridor through the South Caucasus. The ceremony will take place on August 8 in Washington with the participation of American President Donald Trump. The agreement is expected to bring an end to the long-standing conflict between the two countries, which escalated before the collapse of the Soviet Union due to the status of Nagorno-Karabakh. Let me remind you, the region came under the control of Azerbaijan in 2023. However, the country still has unresolved issues regarding the unblocking of transport routes. Thus, Baku is interested in a direct land connection that would link the southwest of the country with the Nakhichevan exclave, which already borders Turkey. If you look at the map, the territory of Azerbaijan is essentially cut by the territory of Armenia. It is assumed that the corridor will pass through the Armenian city of Megri in the Shunik region, and it will essentially connect Nakhichevan with the main part of Azerbaijan. For understanding, we are talking about the Zangezur corridor, but I think this name will gradually disappear from use. I'll explain this in more detail a little later. I would like to note that recently the advisor to Iran's supreme leader on international affairs, Ali Akbar Velayati, stated that any attempt to advance the Zangezur corridor project would be met with a tough response from Iran. Here is a quote from Velayati. Once again, some governments have raised the issue of the Zangezur corridor, and they keep pushing every day, pursuing their illegal goals in the South Caucasus. I want to remind you that any government in the region or beyond that tries to repeat this failed experience will face a tough response from Iran. Earlier, this same Velayati, a very close associate of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, stated that the implementation of the Zangezur corridor project is aimed at undermining Iran's national security and the country's strategic ties. According to him, the Zangezur corridor is a geopolitical scheme led by the United States of America. And of course by Israel as well. Here is the quote. The enemies of Iran are consistently trying to undermine the foundations of this identity in order to harm national security. In this context, plans like the Zangezur corridor are being implemented as a cover for broader geopolitical projects. The main goal of weakening our axis of resistance is these terrorist cells throughout the region to break Iran's ties with the Caucasus and to establish a land blockade of Iran and Russia in the south of the region. According to him, the project is not only part of the United States strategy to shift pressure from Ukraine, but is also supported by NATO and some pan-Turkic movements. And, paradoxically, Vilayati is partially right, we have to admit that, and I'll explain why a bit later. As a result of the peace agreement signed at the White House between Armenia and Azerbaijan, it is Washington that will control this artery, this corridor. The project has received a new name. Now it's called the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. It's no surprise that Trump decided to name the Zangezur corridor after himself. Basically, this doesn't change the essence of it. Just know that when you hear about the Trump corridor, it's referring to the Zangezur corridor. The corridor will be operated in accordance with Armenian law. At the same time, the United States will be able to transfer participation in the consortium for the construction and management of the infrastructure. Interestingly, various sources claim that Trump's route is being considered as an alleged alternative to the previous concept of the so-called Zangezur corridor, which Yerevan opposed. To avoid confusion, let me explain as early as 2023. The Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, noted that the phrase Zangezur corridor, quote, serves as a title for making territorial claims against Armenia. And he proposed his own project called Crossroads of Peace, within which it was planned to restore the previously dismantled railway in the south of Armenia, so that Azerbaijan could use it for direct communication with Nakhichevan. In fact, this is the restoration of the very same Zangezur corridor, but Armenians simply don't want it to be called that because Zangezur is, after all, an Azerbaijani name. But as you know, that doesn't alter its core meaning. The route will go through the same place. They've just changed the name so that no one has any objections. Now it will be called the route with a very long poetic name, the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. So we all understand what's going on. So, the Trump route will become a key element of the peace agreement that the parties intend to sign on Friday. In addition, Armenia and Azerbaijan are expected, and this is important, to officially announce the end of their participation in the Minsk group, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which since its establishment in 1999 with the mediation of France, Russia and the United States, has supposedly been working on resolving the conflict around Nagorno-Karabakh. It's very important. It was precisely within the framework of this Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Minsk Group program that so-called Russian peacekeepers, meaning Russian soldiers, were present in Karabakh. This means that now this entire group is being shut down, it's closing, and Azerbaijan and Armenia are publicly saying that they no longer need it. Everyone, disband it. This means that the Russians no longer have any influence on the situation in the region at all, and they will no longer be able to send so-called peacekeepers there. Progress in the Armenian-Azerbaijani settlement began to show in March when the region was visited by the special United States envoy Steve Witkoff. And now American officials believe that establishing peace in the South Caucasus could push Azerbaijan to negotiate joining the Abraham Accords, which Trump made between Israel and 4 Muslim-majority countries during his first presidential term. That means Azerbaijan could join these accords. And now, let's move on to Iran. And finally, I'll explain why Vilayati, that same advisor to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is partially right when he says, listen, they're starting to infringe on us, they're isolating us, this is a blow to our security, and so on. The thing is, this peace agreement could transform the South Caucasus, a region that produces energy resources, borders Russia, Europe, Turkey and Iran, is crossed by oil and gas pipelines, but is torn apart by these closed borders and long-standing ethnic conflicts. Iran has exploited this situation for a very long time. Azerbaijan requested a transport corridor through Armenia that would connect most of its territory with Nakhichevan, that is the Azerbaijani exclave bordering Azerbaijan's ally Turkey. For Iran, not only regional connections are at stake, but also the geopolitical order along Iran's sensitive northern border. For Iran, this 43-kilometer-long corridor, I believe, running through Armenia's Syunik province is of great importance for its strategic calculations. In fact, the new corridor deprives Iran of its natural land access to the South Caucasus through Armenia, making it dependent on a route controlled by Azerbaijan and the United States. Some analysts call this the geopolitical strangulation of Iran. And here's the most important part. In this situation, Iran actually becomes completely dependent on Azerbaijan for trade, not only with the South Caucasus, but also with Russia and Europe. The thing is, previously Azerbaijan was forced to connect with Nakhchivan and then with Turkey through Iranian territory. Moreover, there is currently discussion about developing a major transport and trade corridor from Central Asia and the Caucasus to Turkey and further into Europe. But since Armenia and Azerbaijan couldn't agree on the creation of the Zangezur corridor for a long time, these routes could pass through the north of Iran. So, if we look at the map, you'll see that the territory of Armenia juts in as if it ends right at the border with Iran. And since there was no corridor, these routes went and were supposed to continue through this small piece of Iranian territory. Now, Iran will no longer be of interest in this supply chain. It's not needed. But what's also important is that the Zangezur corridor deprives Iran of its connection to Russia through Armenia. Friends, in more detail, with all the maps, with all the explanations, I explained the essence of this corridor in a separate episode. And now, a link to that separate episode is appearing somewhere on your screens. I highly recommend watching it to be fully in context. Finally, I'll add one more crucial point. Pashinyan, Aliyev, and Trump will meet at the White House on the same day. When Trump set a deadline for Russian President Vladimir Putin to agree to steps to end the invasion of Ukraine. Otherwise, he faces further economic sanctions. And such a blow to Russia's influence in the region is quite significant. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.